I didn't plan on that morning becoming the moment everything snapped, but there I was, watching a 25-year-old with 3 months of experience accept the promotion I'd spent 6 years earning. Linda, his mother, and my manager called it fresh vision. Everyone clapped like it wasn't the most humiliating moment of my career. They thought they'd won. They thought I'd stay quiet. What they didn't realize was that some people hold entire operations together without ever raising their voice. And when those people walk away, the whole system trembles. If you've ever lived through something like this, tell me in the comments and subscribe for more stories like mine. I never expected my second chance at life to come from a logistics company tucked between the foothills and an industrial park, but Ridgeway Supply Systems became the place where I rebuilt myself from the ground up. 6 years ago, I walked into that building carrying more than a resume. I was carrying the weight of starting over as a single mom who couldn't afford another mistake. Back then, I wasn't looking for glory. I just needed stability, structure, and a paycheck that wouldn't collapse under the pressure of rent, healthcare, and my daughter's after-school tutoring. Linda Marlowe, the regional director, shook my hand with that overly bright smile people use when they're pretending they're doing you a favor. "We value dedication here," she'd said. It sounded like a promise. I later learned it was a warning. The job wasn't glamorous. Long hours, supply chain fires, urgent client calls at 7 p.m., shipments stuck 3 states away with no backup plan. But building order out of chaos was something I understood better than most. You can't be a single mother and survive without mastering logistics. Give me a late truck, a broken pallet jack, or a panicked production manager. I'd untangle the knot before most people finish complaining about it. Within a year, vendors trusted me more than they trusted the executives managing them. Clients called me by name. Some even refused to talk to anyone else. Operations people are invisible until something explodes, and then suddenly everyone acts like you're the only firefighter in the county. I didn't mind it. I took pride in fixing what other people ignored. I didn't want applause. I wanted to go home feeling like my daughter could look at me and see someone strong. I gave Ridgeway everything. Early mornings, late nights, the weekends I should have been at my daughter's school events. I still remember the October when she played her first violin solo, and I missed it because Linda needed a last-minute performance deck polished by Monday. "You're a lifesaver," Linda told me that morning. "I knew I could rely on you." Funny how the word rely sounds flattering until you realize it means they're comfortable letting you drown so they can keep their hands clean. For the such years, I learned every corner of our logistics network: freight timing, vendor shortage patterns, the 3 suppliers who always lied about inventory, the 2 who never did, the manufacturing plants that needed deliveries within 4-hour windows, or their lines shut down. I built backup systems no one asked for, because I'd learned the hard way that being prepared was the only thing that kept a fragile life from collapsing again. Linda praised my initiative, always with a tone that implied initiative was the minimum she expected. She'd pat my arm during meetings and say, "Zara keeps us running," like I was the office mascot instead of the one holding the entire region together. Every annual review was the same: perfect marks, glowing comments, and the same closing line: "You're on track for leadership. Just stay patient." I stayed patient. I stayed loyal. I stayed late more times than I can count. And somewhere along the way, I started to believe that hard work really could outweigh politics, that competence meant something, that I wouldn't be overlooked forever. Then Linda's son, Evan, graduated with a business degree, wandered into Ridgeway with his mother's smile, and everything I'd built, everything I'd sacrificed, started to shift beneath my feet like the ground had finally decided it was done holding still for me. The morning of the announcement didn't feel special at first, just the usual stale coffee drifting from the break room and the hum of printers trying to keep up with end-of-month reports. But there was an edge in the air, the kind that makes everyone sit up a little straighter, even if they don't know why. Linda had called an all-hands meeting in the conference room, which only happened when something big was coming. People whispered the usual guesses: a contract win, a restructuring, maybe even the long-awaited leadership promotion. I didn't dare assume it was mine, but after 6 years of carrying this place on my back, I couldn't stop my stomach from fluttering with the smallest spark of hope. When I walked into the room, Evan was standing beside Linda at the front, shifting from foot to foot like a kid forced to recite a poem at church. He'd only been with Ridgeway for 3 months, and half of that time, he'd spent asking me the same questions I'd already answered twice. I didn't think much of it. Nepotism babies float around every company like helium balloons. Pretty to look at, useless in a storm, but then people started clapping, and Linda began smiling, and I felt something tighten in the center of my chest. "We're thrilled to announce," she said, projecting her voice with that polished corporate excitement she reserved for board visits, "that Evan Marlowe will be stepping into the role of Senior Logistics Director for our region." The clapping got louder. Someone even whistled. It all sounded like it was happening underwater. Evan grinned awkwardly and straightened his jacket, the one he wore like armor against the fact that he didn't know the difference between a freight carrier and a broker. I stood there frozen, hands stiff at my sides, as every ounce of belief I'd held about fairness, loyalty, and merit quietly disintegrated. 6 years of building relationships, solving crises, absorbing blame for mistakes that weren't mine, none of it mattered. Evan had the right last name. I had the right skill set. And in this company, only one of those things held any real power. Linda's eyes found mine in the crowd. She actually smiled at me. "And of course," she said, with that patronizing warmth executives use when they think they're paying you a compliment, "we couldn't have gotten Evan up to speed without Zara's incredible support. Truly invaluable." Invaluable. That word felt like a slap. Not valuable enough to promote, not valuable enough to reward, but invaluable enough to train her son, cover for him, and carry the weight he would never understand. The room kept applauding, and I forced myself to clap too because every pair of eyes would have been on me otherwise. I clapped for the unfairness, for the insult, for the humiliation of being publicly thanked for helping bring about my own replacement. When the meeting ended, people formed a line to shake Evan's hand. Some congratulated Linda, others pretended not to look at me because they all knew, every single one of them knew, what that promotion should have been. And yet they said nothing. Silence is its own form of betrayal. I gathered my things slowly, trying to breathe, trying to keep my face calm even though my pulse wouldn't settle. As I turned to leave, Linda touched my arm lightly the way someone touches a dog they want to keep calm. "I know this is unexpected," she murmured, "but Evan brings a fresh perspective. You understand, right? This isn't personal." It was always personal. She just didn't think I was allowed to take it that way. "I understand perfectly," I said, and for the first time, I felt something shift inside me. Not anger yet, not sadness, just a hollow clarity. The kind that comes right before everything changes. The kind that tells you the ground you've been standing on was never solid to begin with. The day after the announcement, the office felt heavier than usual, like everyone was waiting for me to crumble or explode or do something dramatic, enough to justify the injustice they'd just watched happen. I didn't give them the satisfaction. I did my job the same way I always had, quietly, precisely, without letting my hands shake when vendors called or when clients demanded answers Evan couldn't give. But inside, something unsettled was building, a slow tightening that made it hard to swallow. Late that evening, after most people had gone home, I stayed behind to finish processing a stack of freight exceptions that Evan had forgotten to review. The hallway? Outside Linda's office was dim, just the glow from her door spilling a pale strip of light across the carpet. I didn't mean to eavesdrop. I only paused because I heard my name, spoken sharply like it was a problem to be solved. "Zara isn't leadership material," Linda was saying. Her tone was crisp, irritated, the way she sounded when she talked about late shipments or underperforming vendors. "She's reliable, but she's the kind of employee who stays where she's put." A man answered, someone from corporate, judging by the deep, polished voice. "Her performance numbers are excellent. Are you sure she'll accept being passed over?" Linda let out a soft laugh, the kind that made my skin crawl. "She's a single mother. She needs this job. She'll fall in line like she always does." Fall in line, like I was a soldier taking orders, like my loyalty was a leash she could yank whenever she needed something done. Linda continued, her voice smoothing into false concern. Besides, Evan has the degree. He has the pedigree. The board wants younger leadership. They want someone with vision. And you're confident he can handle the region? The corporate man asked. Linda hesitated, just long enough to reveal the truth. He'll learn. Zara can support him. She always makes things work. The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. I gripped the wall, suddenly aware of how quiet the building was, how the hum of the AC was the only witness to the moment my self-respect was stripped bare. They hadn't just overlooked me, they had decided who I was, what I was capable of, what I would tolerate. They had made assumptions about my life, my struggles, my choices, as if those things gave them permission to exploit me, and I had let them. For 6 years I had convinced myself that patience was strength, that hard work would be recognized, that people like Linda eventually saw value in people like me. But standing there in the dim hallway, listening to her describe me like a tool she could pick up and put down whenever she pleased, I realized patience had only made me predictable, and therefore controllable. My throat burned not with tears but with something sharper, something that made my pulse thrum in my ears. It wasn't rage yet. Rage comes quickly, brightly, a flash fire. This was slower, colder, a tightening of the spine, a steadying of the breath, a clarity that settled into my bones like winter air. Linda thought I would fall in line. She thought my responsibilities made me weak. She thought my silence was obedience rather than strategy. She thought she knew me, but she didn't know a damn thing. I stepped away from the door quietly, each movement careful and deliberate. I wasn't ready to confront her. Not yet. Not until I knew exactly what I planned to do. Walking down that hallway in the hush of fluorescent lights and half-empty cubicles, I felt it for the first time, the shift. Something inside me, straightened, settled, aligned. I wasn't going to fall in line anymore. Not for Linda, not for Ridgeway, not for anyone. I didn't sleep the night after overhearing Linda, but for the first time in months, it wasn't exhaustion keeping me awake. It was clarity, cold, precise, almost comforting in its sharpness. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my daughter asleep in the next room, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. Every word Linda said replayed in my head, but instead of hurting, they arranged themselves into something clean and decisive. By morning, the decision was already made. I arrived early, earlier than I needed to, not because I wanted to impress anyone, but because I needed the building quiet while I acted. I sat at my desk, opened a blank document, and typed the words I had never allowed myself to imagine. This letter serves as my formal resignation. My fingers moved with an ease that surprised me. No shaking, no hesitation. Just the smooth release of 6 years' worth of swallowed pride, finally finding a voice. By the time the office filled with morning chatter, my letter was printed, folded, and sealed in an envelope resting beside my keyboard. Evan strolled in around 9:15 wearing the same overconfident grin he used whenever he tried to project leadership. "Morning, Zara," he said, dropping his jacket on his chair like a college kid. "Big day ahead." For him, maybe. For me, something far bigger. I didn't respond and he didn't notice. He rarely noticed anything outside the orbit of his own reflection. At 3:55 p.m., when the office had settled into its afternoon lull, I stood, took the envelope, and walked to Linda's door. She was typing something. Her expression pinched the way it got whenever a vendor pushed back on billing terms. I knocked lightly. She glanced up, and her face brightened with that strained attempt at warmth she used to disguise condescension. "Zara, good. I needed to talk to you about some of Evan's transition files. He's feeling a bit overwhelmed." "This is my 2 weeks' notice," I said, placing the envelope on her desk before she could finish. Her face didn't fall all at once. It tightened in stages. First the eyes, then the jaw, then the corners of her mouth. She reached for the envelope with stiff fingers and tore it open. As she read, her eyebrows inched higher. "Is this a joke?" "It's not." She threw the letter onto the desk as if it had burned her. "You're leaving because Evan got the promotion?" "Zara, that is unbelievably unprofessional." I stayed quiet, letting the silence settle like dust. Linda stood abruptly and began pacing, arms crossed over her chest. You need to think about this. Your situation, your responsibilities. You can't just walk away from stability because your pride is bruised. There it was, the leverage she thought she owned. I'll manage, I said. Zara? She snapped. I'm warning you. You. Walk out now and I won't give you a good reference. You won't find the same flexibility anywhere else, not with your circumstances. That's your choice, I replied. My calmness infuriated her more than any argument could have. You're throwing away your future over a title, she said, her voice rising, over something you were never entitled to. That stung, not because she believed it, but because she wanted me to believe it too. I took a slow breath. I'm not throwing away anything. I'm reclaiming what I should have never given you, my loyalty. Her mouth tightened into a thin, sharp line. If you think Evan needs your help, he doesn't, she said. He'll figure it out. It was an oddly panicked lie. She knew it. I knew it. The walls probably knew it. I'll finish my 2 weeks, I said. He'll get whatever documentation he needs. Linda scoffed. Documentation? You think you're taking some noble high ground? You're running away. I walked toward the door, stopping only when she spat. This is a mistake, Zara, a big one. I turned back, meeting her eyes with a steadiness I didn't know I had. Maybe, but at least it's mine. And as I stepped out of her office, I felt it again, the shift. Not relief, not triumph, just a clean, quiet sense of finally choosing myself after 6 long years of being chosen last. The strange thing about leaving a place that's taken you for granted is how quickly the world outside seems to recognize what they never did. The morning after I turned in my resignation, I expected panic, my own, not theirs. Instead, I felt a steadiness I hadn't known in years. I brought my daughter to school, drank my coffee without rushing, and walked into Ridgeway with the calm of someone who had nothing left to lose. By noon, word had spread farther than I expected. Vendors were emailing me directly asking if I was still their point of contact. Clients requested clarification about leadership changes. Some messages were polite, others were worried, a few were downright frantic. Evan was already struggling. I could see it in the way he kept hovering near my desk, pretending to be confident while scanning my spreadsheets like they were written in Greek. Meanwhile, I took my lunch break outside for the first time in months. My phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. Zara? This is Mark Bradley from Torque Lane Logistics. Heard you might be open to new opportunities. My pulse kicked. Torque Lane was one of the fastest growing logistics distributors in the region, a place I'd quietly admired from a distance but never dared to dream about. We talked for 20 minutes. He asked about my experience, the networks I'd built, the systems I'd designed. He didn't ask why I was leaving Ridgeway. He didn't need to. People in logistics talk, especially when a regional director promotes her underqualified son into a role that keeps companies alive. We've been trying to expand our automotive component division, Mark said. Someone with your relationships could accelerate that growth? I told him I was still employed for the next 2 weeks. He chuckled. I doubt they'll keep you that long. When can you interview? The confidence in his voice, the certainty that my worth was obvious, it was like oxygen. We scheduled an interview for Thursday. By the time I hung up, another message had come through. Then another. 3 companies in one afternoon, all asking the same question. Are you available? Back inside, Evan was red-faced, muttering into the phone about freight delays he didn't know how to fix. Linda's office door was shut, her blinds drawn, never a good sign. For years, I had been the one patching holes in Ridgeway's sinking ship, but now the water was rising fast, and I wasn't holding the bucket anymore. I finished the day documenting processes Evan had never bothered to learn, not for Linda, not for Ridgeway, but because the clients deserved stability, even if the company didn't. And as I drove home that night, my phone buzzing with yet another voicemail from a competitor, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, possibility. Ridgeway believed I would fall apart without them, but it was becoming clear they were the ones who couldn't survive without me. My interview with Torque Lane happened faster than I expected. Thursday morning, I walked into their office prepared to explain my worth, only to discover they already knew it better than Ridgway ever had. Mark greeted me with a firm handshake and an expression that said he'd been waiting for this moment. We talked for an hour about vendor strategy, crisis management, delivery windows, the suppliers I'd rehabilitated, the clients who trusted me more than their own procurement teams. When I finished, he leaned back, crossed his arms, and said, "Zara, we'd be lucky to have you. The question is, are you ready to grow?" I didn't realize how starved I'd been for words like that until they hit me. I left the interview with an offer that didn't just validate me, it exceeded everything Ridgway had ever hinted at. A director title, a salary that made breathing easier, benefits I didn't know to hope for. And something even more powerful, respect, the kind that doesn't need to be spoken to be real. By Friday morning, Ridgway's cracks were showing. Evan arrived with dark circles under his eyes, hair uncombed, shirt wrinkled like he'd slept in his car. My guess was close. He'd stayed up half the night trying to untangle a backlog of vendor issues he didn't understand. Documents he had never bothered to read were now landmines waiting to explode. He hovered by my desk again, trying to look authoritative. "So, the North Line order. Do you know where the Tucson shipment is?" I didn't even sigh this time. "Check the backup routing sheet for Carrier B, page 6. Blinked at me. "Backup? What?" Exactly. By noon, the first big hit landed, a message from Northline Auto. "If the bracket shipment doesn't arrive by 4 p.m., we're canceling the contract." That contract was worth millions annually. I'd personally kept it afloat through 3 supplier transitions, 2 plant expansions, and 1 near shutdown. Evan responded to the email with a chirpy, "We're looking into it," as if cheerfulness could disguise incompetence. The problem was simple. Carrier A had stalled. The solution was even simpler. Switch to Carrier B through the emergency distribution hub I'd set up 2 years earlier. But Evan didn't know that system existed, and Linda didn't either. By 2:15 p.m., the contract was gone, canceled just like that. The shock rippled through the office so fast you could feel the air shift. Linda stormed out of her office, red-faced, whisper-screaming at Evan about negligence, about expectations, about how this should have been impossible. It wasn't impossible. It was predictable. Minutes later, Crescent Fabrication called, then RPM Steelworks, all reporting errors, delays, unanswered emails, missing documentation. The region wasn't just wobbling, it was caving in. "Zara," Linda said sharply, appearing at my desk as if she'd conjured herself there through sheer desperation. "I need you to start monitoring Evan's accounts more closely." "Linda," I said quietly, "I have 9 days left here." Her jaw clenched. "Then do your job for 9 days." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the truth she'd been avoiding. She'd built her leadership on the assumption that I would always be there to catch what she and Evan dropped. But now the floor was littered with everything they didn't know how to carry. And with every client complaint, every missed deadline, every frantic email, Ridgway lost something they couldn't buy back. Their credibility, their operational backbone, their illusion of competence. By the time I clocked out that evening, the region was bleeding clients fast. And for the first time, Linda understood the one thing she never wanted to believe. Ridgway wasn't collapsing because I left. It was collapsing because for 6 years, I was the only thing holding it together. 6 months after I walked out of Ridgway for the last time, I was sitting in my new office at Torque Lane, reviewing expansion forecasts for the upcoming quarter, when Mark stepped in holding a magazine like it was a punchline he couldn't wait to deliver. "You'll want to see this," he said, sliding it across my desk. The headline hit me first. "Regional Collapse at Ridgway Supply Systems. Internal Failures and Nepotism Under Fire." I read the article slowly, not out of spite, but out of something quieter. Closure. Northline left, Crescent left, RPM left. Several other clients defected in a wave, each citing mismanagement, missed deadlines, or lack of leadership. The region had hemorrhaged more than half its annual revenue. An internal audit revealed what everyone had whispered privately for years. Evan was unqualified, and Linda had manipulated reporting structures to protect him. The board removed her. Evan resigned soon after, though the article didn't say from what: pride, pressure, or the realization he couldn't hide behind his mother anymore. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Some collapses speak for themselves. A month later, during a layover in Denver, I stopped at a small coffee shop tucked near the escalators. When I looked up from my cup, I saw Evan at a corner table, wearing the uniform shirt of a mid-level distribution center, entry-level logistics work, the kind he should have started with in the first place. He saw me and froze, not embarrassed, not angry, just aware of what had been built honestly and what had not. I walked over because running from ghosts is a waste of time. He didn't stand. He didn't pretend confidence. "Zara," he said quietly, "I'm trying to start over." "Good," I replied. And I meant it. Everyone deserves the chance to rebuild, just not at the expense of others. As I left, I felt a calm I had never known at Ridgeway. Not triumph, not revenge, just the steady truth of a life rebuilt on my terms. Sometimes the strongest payback isn't destruction. It's becoming someone they can never again afford to underestimate. I learned something through all of this that I wish someone had told me years ago. If you don't decide your own worth, someone else will gladly decide it for you, and they will always, always undervalue you. I spent 6 years believing loyalty would be recognized, that hard work guaranteed fairness, that keeping my head down was the same as being respected. But the truth is, people who benefit from your silence will never encourage you to speak. People who rely on your strength will never admit how much they need you. And people who take you for granted will never hand you the life you deserve. I chose the value motive because that's what ultimately set me free. When I finally understood that my worth wasn't tied to a title, a company, or a manager's approval, everything changed. I didn't win by beating Linda. I didn't win by watching Ridgeway collapse. I won the moment I stopped needing their validation. Sometimes the quietest revenge is simply refusing to stay where you're underestimated. Sometimes the sharpest knife you'll ever use is silence, the kind that comes with walking away and letting the truth reveal itself. In real life, this lesson applies more than we like to admit. If you're stuck somewhere that drains you, if someone keeps moving the finish line, if you're always giving more than you're receiving, it's not noble. It's not loyalty. It's erosion. You deserve to work in places where your contributions matter, where leadership isn't inherited like a family heirloom, and where your effort isn't a trap disguised as gratitude. And if you're afraid to leave, trust me, fear fades fast when your self-respect returns. How to get started today. Write down 3 things you do that no one else sees but everyone relies on. Set one boundary before the day ends. Even a small no counts. Look at one job listing even if you don't apply. Just remind yourself you have options. If this story resonated with you, tell me your experience in the comments. Share this with someone who needs it, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like mine.